Before I get into the warm-up, I want everyone just to listen really quickly, because I said this on the very first day, and I could absolutely tell after grading your homeworks from the first day, some of you chose to not listen, so I want you to listen now. This is not the unit to not do your classwork. This is not the unit to skip your classwork, skip the checking it with an answer key process, and go on to your homework because you're in a hurry, or you want to socialize, or you want to do your homework faster. That is dumb. And what I have already told you for weeks is the hardest unit for the year. And I could absolutely tell by grading your homework, those of you that listened and those of you that didn't. Don't let that happen again. You do your classworks, you use your keys, you work with your groups where you're sitting, and you get through that before you decide to move to socialize. Because you are here to get better at algebra, not to catch up on things. Okay? You're in an honors level high school class and you need to start acting like it. First thing I said, when you get a graph and you're doing rise over run, what did I say you need to check before you do anything?
Scale.
Scale of the graph. And many of you didn't. Many of you didn't on that homework. Bottom right-hand corner. Bottom right-hand corner. Didn't scale the graph. Some of you never wrote increasing or decreasing, which absolutely tells me you didn't do the classwork, because there's no way you checked your classwork against my answer keys and then chose to not write increasing or decreasing, because you would have seen on my classwork answer keys the words increasing or decreasing, or horizontal or vertical. Do your classwork. It's practice. And there is nothing you will do in life where practice doesn't make you better. Nothing. Athletics, dance, music, doesn't matter. Practice makes you better. Okay? So make sure you're doing your practice. Today's an extension day. Slope extension. I'm going to cover a few notes, which should be like kind of refreshers from last year. But again, as we kind of found, some of us kind of forgot the stuff from last year. Then you're going to work on classwork only. It's 3 pages of classwork. It's slope extension day. Okay? You need to know everything on slope extension before we can move forward into X and Y intercepts. The X and Y intercepts part, which you see us on Friday, is the first day of real Unit 4. That's where we begin to do things that you shouldn't already know. Everything else has kind of been a review from either 7th grade pre-AP, if you were in 7th grade pre-AP, or from 6th grade compacted. Okay? The only thing that should be brand new are the kids who leapfrogged from 6th grade pre-AP to 7th grade algebra. Those are the only ones who have an excuse as to having never seen slope before. Everyone else should have seen slope. Okay? So let's get through this one. So, find the slope of the line containing the points below. In number 1, it's a table. So what are we thinking on table? How do we decide on table what to do? Joey? Change in y over change in x. Change in y over change in x. So we're literally asking how we get from one point to the next. This is plus 6. This is plus 7. How do you get from 22 to 58? Plus 36. And from 58 to 100 is plus 42. And the thing we have to remember is that it is change in y over change in x. Does it matter which set we pick? No. It shouldn't, because slope is constant. So I'll do 42 over 7, making sure if one's a negative, I bring that with me. Then in my calculator, I'll do 42 divided by 7, math enter, and it will tell me that my slope is 6. It will tell me that my slope is 6. Now, if you wrote 6 over 1, I would have accepted that, but you need to only write integers or fractions. Now, for some of you on your homework, on the bottom left-hand one, you wrote like negative 5 over 5. That is not simplified. Negative 5 over 5 is not a simplified slope. If you'd written negative 1 over 1, we're taking that. If you wrote negative 1, I would have taken that, but not negative 5 over 5. I would recommend you just math enter if you're in doubt. Okay? So in number 2, when we have 2 ordered pairs, what can we do to find the slope?
Oh, you do the parentheses minus parentheses.
You can do the slope formula. What else could you do? You could put the, do what? What's the Kelly? You could put the order pairs on a graph and measure rise over run. What else could you do? Put them in a table and do change in y over change in x. It's whichever one you're comfortable with. But I'll go ahead and do the labeling. x1, y1, x2, y2. So I end up with this. so I end up with negative 1 minus 2 over 5 minus negative 3. Negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3. 5 minus negative 3 is 8. So your slope is negative 3/8. Your slope is negative 3/8. Okay? And finally, from a graph, right off the bat, I'm just going to look at the scale real fast. And this one we're good because everything's by ones. So now we can just measure rise and run, but we have to find good points. I have a good point here, and I have a good point here. I could have also chose this down here, and I could have chosen that down there as well. But I'm going to go ahead and just do this. So the first thing we measure is the what? We measure the rise. Rise is either up or down. In this case, it is down, so it is down 3 over 1. So our slope is negative 3 over 1, which is negative 3. Everybody good with that? Any questions at all? All right, so let's talk about slope from an equation, which is the last piece before you do the extension. Now, again, I know what my kids learned last year, and so we'll kind of talk through this as we go. But to find the slope from a given equation, we use what's called the slope-intercept form of an equation. And the slope-intercept form of an equation is this right here. Y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b. Go ahead. And in that equation, the variable m represents the slope. That's why you saw in previous worksheets, where it says slope, I wrote m equals. I want you to get in the habit of knowing m is the slope. When it is written in slope-intercept form, the slope is the coefficient of x. Now what that means is it's the number in front of the x term. It's always the number in front of the x term. If you don't see a number in front of the x term, what's the number? 1. Which means if you don't see a number in front of x, what's the slope? 1. Which means from one point to another, what is it doing? It's going up 1 over 1, because 1 as a whole number made into a fraction is 1 over 1. Rise 1 over 1. Rise 1 over 1. If the slope is negative x, if it says y equals negative x, what's the slope? Negative 1, written as a fraction, negative 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. Okay? Everyone get that? So we have to use what we learned in Unit 3 sometimes to get our equation into y equals form. So let's go through the process. In number 1, where do we look to find the slope? Coefficient of x. The coefficient of x is negative 1/3. That is our slope. Now you'll notice I usually put the negative sign with the numerator. I don't leave it out front. And it's because I want you thinking that when you get from one point to the next, if you were to graph this, from one point to the next point, you should be going down 1 over 3. Down 1 over 3. Is that an increasing or a decreasing line? Decreasing. Is it flat or is it steep? It's flat. There's going to be a flat line because it's running more than it is rising. Make sense? Okay, slope number 2. 5. When you think about it as the slope, change it to a fraction, and then think, is that going to be a steep line or a flat line? Steep, because it's going up 5 over 1. Okay? Yes. And we'll get to that in a few days. Yes, but the other number absolutely has a purpose. We'll get to it in a few days. Okay? Right now, I want you focusing on slope. Okay? What's the slope on number 3? Negative 2 over 7. Decreasing or increasing? Decreasing, flat or steep? Flat. Down 2 over 7. Down 2 over 7. Slope on number 4? Negative 1. Because it's the coefficient of x. It's the coefficient of x. You have to slow, think, then answer. Okay? Which means it goes down 1 over 1. Is it steep or flat? It's neither. Very good, Kaylee. It's neither. It is neither steep nor flat because its run and its rise are the same number. It's changing at the same rate. Down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. It's neither steep nor flat. Okay? Everybody good with that? All right, so here we go. On number 5, what's the slope? It is not, because it is not in y equals form. So we are going to put this into y equals form. What would we do first?
Minus 2y.
We would subtract 3x.
Oh,
Now I want everyone to look up and watch this. So does everyone agree that I will subtract 3x on both sides? That's my first move. When you rewrite it, this goes away, and you end up with 2y equals, when you write the other side, I want the x term first. So negative 3x plus 10. I want the x term first. That puts it in the slope-intercept form, so you don't have to deal with it anymore. No more tricks like this. And then what's my last step? Divide everything individually by 2. Don't do the big long line. Just do every single term by 2. And what you end up with is y equals negative 3 halves x plus 5. Which means my slope is negative 3 over 2. Decreasing or increasing? Decreasing, steep or flat? Steep. Not very steep, but steep. See if you can get number 6 in the slope-intercept form. Which, when I say slope-intercept form, I mean y equals form. See if you can get number 6 into y equals form. This is why Unit 3 is before Unit 4. Because you have to know how to manipulate those equations. Now, once you subtracted x, you should have gotten negative 4y equals negative x minus 16. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We're going to divide everything by what? Negative 4. Now, I want you to watch what happens. Here's where you kind of have to think for a second. This cancels and leaves you y equals.
1/4.
It is 1/4. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, and the number that's there that you can't see is a 1. So this becomes 1/4 x plus 4, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. This is your slope-intercept form. Guys, if you have this, if you have x over 8, don't write it like that. Write it as 1/8 x. Write it as 1/8 x. Okay? Because that way you can see the slope. Because this is a slope unit. I need you to see the slope. You can't really see the slope in this form. You can see the slope much better in this form because it's the coefficient of x. So what's my slope? 1/4. Very good. 1/4. It's an increasing line that's kind of what? Flat. It's kind of flat. It's an increasing line that's kind of flat. Any questions on that? Alrighty. So it's kind of a mini extension lesson covering slope. I will remind you that in a word problem, how do we identify the coefficient of x? What are we looking for in a word problem that tells us the slope? Taylor, do you remember? Perfect. If you see the words per or each, that is typically the m number. Now here's the funny thing. When you have y equals mx plus b, some of y'all said, what about the other number? The other number is what variable in this equation? B. It's our b value. In a word problem, do any of my guys, or I guess anyone else, remember how you find the b? The m is the per or each. Anybody remember how to find the b? What, Madison? Perfect. In a word problem, it's like the flat rate. It's the charge that doesn't change based off of how many Cokes you buy, or how many tickets you buy, or how many whatevers you do. There's a flat rate that is your b, and there is a per or each guy that is your m. That's how you kind of set it up. Everything else is input and output. Yes? It is, but we're going to talk about that in a few days. Yeah. Okay, any questions? Okay, I'll put the keys out front and back. Use your time wisely today.